It's time to draw your last pathetic card, because today we're going over in-depth Blue Eyes. Hey guys, Otaku here. I'm back with another in-depth guide, and today we're going to be talking about Blue Eyes White Dragon. Crazy to think that in 2025 we would be out here talking about Blue Eyes White Dragon being once again a meta contender since, it won Worlds way back when. If you're new to the in-depth guides, then the purpose of these videos is to not only teach you how to play Blue Eyes in a more in-depth manner, but also how to play against it if you find yourself on the other end of the table. So today we'll be discussing a couple different builds, tech cards, counters to the deck if you're playing against it, and even some combos. But before we do, I have noticed that a great deal of you that watch these videos are not currently subscribed to the channel, so if you like competitive-based content, in-depth guides, tier lists, and more, then consider subscribing to the channel so I can continue to make videos like this one, but also leave a like on this video, comment down below your thoughts on Blue Eyes as a new meta contender once again, but also take a look at the description down below where you will find a link to my Twitch channel where I stream very randomly, my community Discord, and even my TCG player link. But with that, let's jump on into the guide. Alright, so just like the mouse video, we are going to be starting with the different tech cards and engines and even counters for the deck. And one thing to know here is that Blue Eyes as a whole only has one lock, and it's a very soft lock. The Link 1 locks you into Dragon Monster special summons until it's off the board, which is pretty easy to do because its own effect, gets it off the board. But other than that, there's really no other locks unless you want to count the Lordly Load lock, which is most of the time irrelevant because you're using that effect to summon a normal monster at the end of the turn anyways. But for some tech cards, the more popular version of the deck right now is the Lordly Load or the Primite engine for the most part. Primite Dragon Ether Barrel is just essentially the full combo. You just normal summon this, and then you get the Lordly Load. Lordly Load will then get the Drill Beam, so you have an Omni Negate at that point. And then Ether Barrel is a level 4 dragon, so you can link into the Link 1 and get full Blue Eyes combo from there. It's actually crazy. And then on top of that, the Primite engine is just infinitely recurable. Because Ether Barrel comes back on the standby phase, and Drill Beam can reset itself if you control Ether Barrel. This shit's crazy, and it's definitely to no surprise why this is the more popular build. That being said, Lordly Loads are like $80 a copy right now, so if you're not looking to spend a fortune to play meta Blue Eyes, you can play the next best option, which is Buster Bladers. Now, because everyone is fiending to play Blue Eyes right now, they are looking towards the Buster Blader cards, which because of this, a lot of the cards have gone up in value. That being said, a whole engine is maybe worth one Lordly Load. Typically, what we're seeing is we are not seeing the Destruction Swordmaster. We have seen him played in some iterations of the build, and at the current moment, the Buster Blader version is not topping. It's primarily Primite. If you don't want to play Primite or you can't afford Primite, then Buster Blader is your next best option. But most of the time, we're not seeing the Destruction Swordsman or Swordsmaster, and if we do, it's only at 1. We are seeing 3 of the Buster Whelp Destruction Swordsman, and we'll get more into this when we get into the builds. This card's just free. You normal summon Sage, and Sage searches this, but also on top of that, if you normal summon this card, you search the trap card, which just officially gets you to the Buster lock. But on top of that, this is a light 1 dragon, which means you can link 1 Blue Eyes, so it's like, this is just a free normal summon. This is crazy. Obviously, we have Dragon Buster, Destruction Sword. This is just a lock on top of the already existing lock, so it's like you lock your opponent from activating effects essentially with like a pseudo Baguska combo, and then this just makes it so they can't keep going. There is like some interesting cool little other builds running around. You could also just play pure, it's really up to you. But at the current moment, the more successful builds are going to be Primite and Buster Blader. Currently, the only successful build has been Primite though, but I can see a Buster build topping regionals here very soon. As for the other tech cards, we are seeing Secret Village run around because this deck is littered with spellcasters between Sage, Maiden, Effect Veiler, and we're even seeing some people play like Master at 1. There's spellcasters everywhere, which means that this is really easy to get to. Ancient Fairy Dragon is a light dragon, which means Spirit Dragon can summon it, so that way you can get to the Secret Village if you just want to apply the lock. Dominus Purge, this deck is exclusively light monsters for the most part. Very few and far between on any other attribute. And because of that, Dominus Purge. You can't run Impulse because everything's light, but Purge is also still a really good card. This is also really good against like the counter, essentially, because they just like normal summon Sage, or they link summon the Link 1 and you go Purge, and if you have a trap in Graveyard, you're destroying it so they don't even have the body anymore, on top of the fact they're not getting the Mausoleum or their level 1 light monster. But Purge is just a crazy card. Effect Veiler, now, like, obviously everyone's running Effect Veiler right now because it's a good target negation for the meta. Target negation is really good in the format, but Veiler also is just Blue Eyes combo in this deck. It is a level 1 light spellcaster, so it can make the Link 1 Blue Eyes. So it's like, if you brick on hand traps and Effect Veiler is one of them, you didn't brick. You just normal summon Effect Veiler, Link 1 into the Spirit, and you keep going. The last tech card is a singular Bestial, and that is Bestial Magnema. Just like in Tenpai, Magnema is just kind of crazy in this deck. Searches a dragon. This is a little more favorable in like the Buster version of the deck, because you can search like Buster Whelp, which will then be full Blue Eyes combo plus Buster Dragon, but it can also search Ether Barrel, which is also just fine as well. We're not seeing any other Bestials, really. Like, the only other Bestials we're really seeing is like one of the Druis Worm or like one Baldrake. We're not seeing an abundance of Bestials because Bestials conflict with the Dominus cards. If you activate Dominus Purge from your hand, then you are not activating a Bestial for the rest of the duel, which means that you don't want to run too many Bestials and draw into dead cards, essentially. So, yeah, Purge heavily conflicts with Mag, so because of that, you really have to just be very careful about how many you run. Mag at 1 is perfectly fine because it helps you like disrupt Fiendsmith plays still. You can fuck with Malice in very odd ways. You can just banish like Griffin or something. For the extra deck, like I said, we are seeing like the Buster Blader cards, so Buster Dragon and Buster Blader the Dragon Destroyer Swordsman for the Buster Lock. But then on top of that, if the game does get back to you, you can summon out the Buster Sword from the back row, and then synchro the Buster Sword and the Buster Dragon to make Hot Red Dragon Archfiend. Hot Red Dragon Archfiend is like essentially an Omni Negate, like a pseudo Omni Negate, and it's 3200 attack. Card's crazy. So if they couldn't break your board the first time, they certainly are breaking it the second time, and that's if they live the second time. We're seeing Lina because light monsters everywhere. Lina kind of go crazy. You just summon like Lina, steal their Blue Eyes, and then go from there. Or you can just use it to steal like Fiendsmith cards, so the Fiendsmith cards can't be like recursive in your opponent's deck. Lina's just a good card in the current format. Seals, again, just like Tenpai, we're seeing Seals. Seals goes kind of crazy because you go Hieratic Seals to bounce, and then you can summon like Ether Barrel, so you have it in rotation if you couldn't, or you just summon a Blue Eyes and then go Maiden in the graveyard, come back, and then like there's a lot of cool interactions with Seals, but overall just a good card. Crimson Dragon with a bunch of other dragons on top of that. Like Cypher, Stardust Cypher. I don't personally like Crimson Dragon. I like that it's an option, but a lot of Blue Eyes players have gotten to the point where they are playing very low to the ground because this deck can lose to Nibiru, which we'll talk about here in a minute. And just going full combo doesn't feel worth it when you can play very low to the ground and still have a very strong end board. At the end of the day, still play Crimson Dragon in your extra deck just so it's there as an option. We're not seeing this, but at the end of the day, it is still Blue Eyes. So there is a chance that we might see this get played, but the extra deck is, you know, pretty tight, but also flexible at the same time, which is weird. The Draglubion, Numeron, OTK combo, you can do it. I wouldn't recommend it personally, but it's still an option. It is still Blue Eyes. As for counters to the deck, target negation's big against this deck. Big interaction that you're going to want to stop when you're going against Blue Eyes is mainly going to be preventing Spirit with Eyes of Blue from adding the Mausoleum. Target negation is better than Ash Blossom, mainly because you are also negating its second effect, whereas it tributes for cost to special summon a Blue Eyes from the graveyard. So if you cut them off of Mausoleum, you're also cutting them off from getting that Blue Eyes from the graveyard back on the board, which then gets Maiden, which gets Spirit Dragon, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So you mainly want to target negate this card, but also when you target negate it, like, it just leaves them with a very awkward Link 1 with 300 attack on the board. They can, of course, still go the effect, pay the cost to get it off the board, but it just makes things a little just weird and awkward for them. And on top of that, most of the time they're committing their normal summon to link into this card, which means that if you cut them off of Mausoleum, they're not getting their second normal summon. Some other big counters towards the deck is going to be Dominus Impulse. You mainly want to activate this against like the True Light, especially if you have a trap in the graveyard. You like say Imperm to your opponent on the Eyes of Blue Link monster, and then they get to E-Soul, they go E-Soul, and you go Dominus Impulse. You're blowing up their entire board at that point. So Impulse just is crazy, but also on top of that, you can like Impulse the Spirit Dragon when it, you know, tributes itself to summon a light Synchro Dragon. Just further interaction on that part. Bish Shields are crazy. If you can cut them off of Maiden or even just like a Blue Eyes, because they only 9 times out of 10 run 2 Blue Eyes in their main deck. So if you cut them off of the Blue Eyes and you banish both of the Blue Eyes, you're really cutting them off a lot of stuff. The only thing is, if they get the ultimate Spirit Dragon on the board, this is no longer an option, because the ultimate Spirit Dragon makes it so you cannot banish cards from their graveyard. So Bish Shields, you got to hit them early, or hit them at least before the ultimate Spirit Dragon hits the board, which is usually on your turn anyways. This mainly only applies to like Malice players, obviously, but Dimension Shifter is crazy. If you can cut them off of just all of their resources, or essentially like Shifter can almost be a turn passer, because they don't want their Blue Eyes hitting the banish pile. They don't want their Maiden hitting the banish pile. Like, they mainly want to keep their resources. So Shifter, kind of just like Atlantean, it's for Blue Eyes, it's a turn passer. They just don't want to waste all their resources. But Shifter is still good against this matchup. It's not like crazy, it's not game breaking ending, but it is still good. Nibiru is 50-50. The reason I say Nibiru is 50-50 is because a very greedy Blue Eyes player will play into Nibiru every time, and if that happens, you basically win the game as long as you have follow-up for the Nibiru. But most good Blue Eyes players right now are playing very low to the ground, because they have discovered that their end board can suffice and be enough with just like a Spirit Dragon and 3 set cards, that they don't have to worry about Nib. Now, Spirit Dragon 9 times out of 10 does end up being summon number 5, which means Nib hits you, but like, that's a very low value Nib compared to a greedy Blue Eyes player. But again, like I said, Nib is very like 50-50 in this deck. It is a matter of how greedy the Blue Eyes player is going to be. I still recommend running it because Nib is just good against other matchups in the format. But if you sided this out game 2 for like a Blue Eyes matchup, I wouldn't blame you, especially if they're playing very low to the ground. But if a Blue Eyes Buster player gets far enough in, Nib does nothing against this deck, because as long as they get to the trap, they're just going to summon the Buster Blader lock on your turn, which means Nib essentially did nothing. You're just like outing the Spirit Dragon. Big thing to know here, now that I've just reminded myself of this, if you are playing Blue Eyes, do not tell your opponent they can't Nib you with Spirit Dragon. Nibiru's ruling for this interaction: Nibiru does not summon 2 monsters at the same time. He summons himself, then the token. It is sequential, which means Spirit Dragon does not stop Nib. You can get nibbed if you have Spirit Dragon on board. I promise you. The last big counter to this deck is going to be Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, and this is for 2 cards specifically. It is going to be for, obviously, the True Light. Like, that's the big one. It's going to pop the True Light, which means whatever effect they try to use will not resolve. But also, on top of that, it is going to cause True Light to just nuke their monsters, Raigeki the board. You can also Ghost Ogre the Primite Lordly Load, which means that they have no Primite card on the board, but also on top of that, they're probably not summoning that normal monster that they were trying to summon right there. You can, this is a big can, I would not recommend this, you can Ghost Ogre the Mausoleum when they try and send a Blue Eyes to the graveyard. Again, would not recommend that, but you can do it. It is something you are allowed to do, but I wouldn't recommend it. One final interaction I want to talk about is going to be Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring is huge against Wishes. Wishes of Eyes of Blue discards a card, which means if you Ash this, it is a -1. You want to stop this card every time. If you have Ash Blossom in hand, you want to stop Wishes for Eyes of Blue, because it's going to just get them so much advantage. They're not only going to be able to get a spell or trap that mentions Blue Eyes, which 9 times out of 10 is going to be Majesty, but they are also going to get Sage or Master or even just Effect Veiler, because it adds a light level 1 tuner, which Effect Veiler falls under that category as well. It can also add Maiden. You usually have Maiden by the time you get this far. I heavily recommend, if you have Ash Blossom, stop this card. If you have the Mirror Match and you have Purge, then you can Purge this so you're not playing into Talents, but heavily stop this card. This card should not be allowed to resolve if you have the opportunity to stop it. All right, so the first deck we're going to be talking about is the more popular version and the more expensive version, Primite. This deck list got top 4 at the Greenville Regional that I recently went to, so congratulations to John Taylor McDaniel. If you're watching this video, you're probably not, but congrats regardless. We're going to take a look at the hand traps first. We're seeing 3 Ash Blossom Joyous Spring, technically 2 Bish Shields, because in this deck, unlike Malice, they're not extenders, so they are technically hand traps. 3 Effect Veiler, because Obviously, it's full Blue Eyes combo. If you open this and you don't have anything else, you can still just normal summon this Blue Eyes combo. So might as well run it at 3. And also, it's not once per turn, so you get the benefit of seeing it multiple times off of Fuelos. 2 Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, 3 Fuelos, 2 Nibiru, and 3 Imperm and 2 Purge. The Purge and Bystials conflict. However, a good player can navigate around that. But that's probably also why they're playing 2 Purge instead of 3. So that way they don't see Purge and the Bystials at like the same time consistently. Purge is also just a once per turn, which means if you see more than one copy off of Fuelos, it is, feels bad. For Blue Eyes cards, we're seeing 3 Maiden, 3 Sage Eyes of Blue, 2 Blue Eyes. This is huge. I've seen a lot of people arguing on whether or not 2 or 3 Blue Eyes is correct. I think 2 is correct because it is, at the end of the day, still kind of a brick. Obviously, you still need Blue Eyes White Dragon specifically. Half these cards say summon Blue Eyes White Dragon exactly. But also, again, at the same time, you don't want to see more than 1 in your opening hand. You really don't want to see 1, but it does happen sometimes. And at the end of the day, 1 being in your hand is not the end of the world because Majesty does allow it to not be a brick, essentially. You can also just discard it off of Wishes. So you just don't want to see more than 1. We're seeing 1 Mausoleum of White because it's incredibly searchable. 1 Roar, 2 Wishes, 1 Majesty, and 1 True Light. 1 True Light because Maiden can get it from anywhere. Hand, graveyard, deck, banishment. Doesn't matter where, she can get it. So even if it's outed once, if you have a second Maiden, you can get it back. Roar is just good to get like that Blue Eyes on the board to kind of make sure that if you've got hand trapped 1 too many times, you can go Roar, summon Blue Eyes, and then if Maiden's engraved, she comes back, and you can still end on like Spirit Dragon. You can end on something. 2 Wishes is interesting. I prefer 3 personally, but at the same time, I can understand why only 2, because after the first one resolves, 9 times out of 10, it's not really good the second time, because you use it to search a spell or trap that mentions Blue Eyes, but if you're doing your first turn correctly, if you're not interrupted at any point, this card is going to probably pull out the only like real target, and True Light will get the other one. So, and it only pulls it from deck. It doesn't pull it from like graveyard or anything like that. So I can see the argument as to why you would only run 2 of this rather than 3, but I personally prefer 3. So that way you can hopefully see it in your opening hand, because the end board, whether you see it in your opening hand or get it off of True Light, are 2 very different end boards. And then for the Primite cards, 3 Ether Barrel, 3 Lordly Load, and 1 Drill Beam. That's really it. We're leaving the side deck out of this. Just one thing to know, because we're going to have to mention it when we get to the extra deck. They were playing Ultimate Slayer, so that's why Aggregator is in the extra deck. So for the extra deck, we're seeing Tyrant Dragon. This card's just crazy. So when it attacks, it can just set any trap card from the graveyard, which means if you earlier in the duel activated like Solemn Strike, then you can just reset Strike, which almost essentially at that point guarantees you're going to win the game. But this can set Dominus Impulse, it can set Imperm, it can reset the Majesty, so you have it again, because in this deck, Majesty is essentially a 2-card pop, because if you do your combo correctly, you have 2 Blue Eyes in rotation, no longer in the deck. 1 Neo Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. This card's never getting summoned because we only play the 2 Blue Eyes, we don't play 3. But this card's only used to equip it off of the Wishes effect, and then get it in the graveyard, so that way you are protected from a target effect, 9 times out of 10 going to be Imperm or Veiler, but it just protects you, protects your Spirit Dragon from getting like Impermed specifically. 1 Black Rose Moonlight. This is just a target to summon off Spirit if you don't want to summon the ultimate Spirit. That way you can also just bounce a card, so there's that. 2 Spirit Dragon. There are builds I'm seeing run around run 3. That's personally up to you. The 1 Spirit Ultimate, because if this hits the board, by the time it hits the board, you're probably winning. You don't need to get it on the board a second time. And then the 1 Light Storm Dragon, again, another target off of Spirit Dragon, just to pop cards, essentially. So if you have 2 Blue Eyes in your graveyard, you're going to get 3 back row pop off of summoning this card. But also, when it is destroyed, you can reset a trap from your graveyard, or a spell. So basically a combo that I've been doing, that if they out my True Light, I'll use Spirit to summon this. So that way when True Light pops this, you can reset the True Light, and then hopefully, if you live the turn, you get back to your turn and you just activate True Light without having to use Maiden. But you can also just reset like Imperm, or you can use it to reset Drill Beam or something along those lines. Like, there's options. Like I said, 1 Aggregator, because they are playing Ultimate Slayer in the extra deck. They are playing Typhon. This card's pretty good just because we are playing like a Blue Eyes format, essentially, like a format with Blue Eyes in it. So if you just summon this, then like Ultimate Spirit Dragon can't use its effect. So you can just summon this, bounce the Ultimate Spirit Dragon, like attack or something along those lines. 2 seals. This just gets you to like what you need, what you're missing. But it also just guarantees like you get to certain cards. So like you can go Hermetic Seal to bounce and like get Magnemite, and on the end phase use Magnemite to, you know, get the Ether Barrel, so you have Crackback and essentially just win the game on the next turn. 1 Lina for the mirror match, but also again you can like steal Engraver out of your opponent's graveyard, so hopefully they don't have follow-up essentially if you don't get to kill them. 1 Little Knight. Little Knight's just Little Knight, and then 2 of the Spirit with Eyes of Blue. I've seen people consider 3. It's really up to you. The extra deck can be tight depending on, you know, what you're going for. All right, so the second build that we're going to talk about is going to be the Buster build. Now, Buster, from what I can tell, has not topped an event yet. It has not topped a YCS, obviously. It has not topped a regional yet. So we haven't seen like a good build. So I just had to like whip up something real quick off of my knowledge of the Buster cards, but also one of my buddies who heavily plays Buster Blader also gave me a little input for this video. For the hand traps, we're just going to start with Ash Blossom Joyous Spring, 1 Bestial Magnemite, 2 of the Effect Veiler, 3 Fuelos, and 3 Imperm, and 3 Dominus Purge. We're running 3 Purge, which means we're going to cut back on the Bestials just a little bit, and we are going to only run the Mag. Mag can search the Whelp, it can search Blue Eyes, it can search a Jet Dragon, it can search a handful of cards in this deck. We don't need the second Bestial. As for like the Blue Eyes cards, we are playing Jet Dragon just for like that extra recursion, get the other level 8 on the board. Graveyard effect is just good. 3 Maiden, 3 Sage, 2 Blue Eyes. We're playing the Mausoleum, the Roar, the 3 Wishes, the True Light, the Majesty still. We are playing the 1 Master. It just has application. If you've already gone through all your lines and you still have like that extra normal summon off of Mausoleum, Master is just like another good normal summon. You can use it to revive a Light Tuner from the graveyard, for example, like Whelp. It also gives you some like mild form of recursion. And then for the Buster cards, we have the singular Buster Blader, 1 Buster Whelp of Destruction Swordsman, Dragon Buster, Destruction Sword, and then we have 1 of each trap card. There's not much to say. You can just search the Buster Whelp off of Sage, go into the Link 1, get the Mausoleum, and Mausoleum gets you the extra normal summon, which lets you normal summon this, which then gets you to the trap cards. That's really all there is to say. That this is just like full combo, essentially. But just like Ether Barrel, this is full combo for both engines. And I say full combo like Buster's really a combo. You just normal summon this, get the trap card, and then you have full combo. We are playing the 1 Pot of Prosperity also for like the ability to see certain cards, because sometimes you just you're missing that one card, or like you would prefer to do your line in a certain way, but like Prosperity is not a must have. You can swap this out for like Called By or a second Bestial, or even just like a third Effect Veiler. It's really up to you. Extra deck, we're looking at Twin Burst. Twin Burst is just really good for like outing assholes, because he can't be destroyed by battle, which means that anything he crashes into that may be bigger than him, he can just then banish it. Obviously not good in the Malice matchup. It's also a contact fuse. So there is that. Still the Tyrant Dragon, the Buster Blader, Dragon Swordsman. This is part of the Buster lock. The Neo Blue Eyes for the target negation. We are playing Azure Eyes. You don't have to. You can cut this for something else. It just is another target off of Spirit Dragon. We can still play the Thunderstorm Dragon if you absolutely want to. In fact, I would almost recommend that. 2 Spirit Dragon, 2 Ultimate Spirit Dragon, 1 Buster Dragon for the Buster lock. It turns everything into dragon, so that way this guy can negate any dragon effect, or just makes it so your opponent can't activate dragon effects. And then we are playing the Hot Red Dragon Archfiend. As I mentioned a little bit ago, if the game gets back to you, which it most likely will because you Buster locked your opponent, you then just summon the Buster Sword from the back row to the main monster zone, synchro the Buster Dragon and the Buster Sword to make this guy, and if you don't get game there, you practically win from that point on. We then still have Seals, we have Little Knight, 2 Spirit with Eyes of Blue, and then we are playing the Buster Blader Link 2. The only reason we're even playing this card is to either get one of the traps in the graveyard if we find the need to do that, but we mainly just do this to put the Buster Sword in the graveyard, so that way we can use Buster Dragon to equip it, just further lock our opponent. If you play Buster Blader extensively, you already know all these cards. All right, so pros and cons of the deck. Starting with pros, very down to earth, like simple combos, and we'll get further into it when we get to the combos. Very just straightforward. There's not like a lot of complexity to the deck. Now, when interacting with your opponent, that's a different story. But in terms of just in-depth like understanding of how to play this deck, it's not a lot. 2, the deck has a incredible amount of room for non-engine because the main engine is like 20 cards. So you have like 20 extra cards if you're trying to go for a minimum of 40 for room for just non-engine or tech cards that can get you to your main engine. On top of that, the deck has a mild way to get to a floodgate, which is just Secret Village of Spellcasters, getting the Ancient Fairy Dragon, and just kind of lock your opponent. And then the deck is playing 3k beaters, so it's like if your opponent just doesn't have like a way to crack your board, you're gonna kill them on the next turn. And then for the last pro, because of how like down to earth this deck is, it plays really good into the Molcharmy Foolos because the deck really only summons once. Like, it summons the Spirit Dragon from the extra deck, and then everything else is from the graveyard. It's not even from the deck. Now, Meows hurts a little bit more because you are special summoning from the graveyard with, like, True Light and Maiden, or even just, like, Sage can or, like, Master can bring stuff back from the graveyard. So, like, at that point, like, Meows hurts a little bit more. Perulia can hurt a little bit because you are summoning from your hand at least once, maybe twice, if you go for the second normal summon. But, like, Foolos, which is considered the more, like, broken of the 3, deck plays fine into Foolos. As for the cons, the deck cannot play one of the biggest counters to itself, which is Bestials, or at least they can't play it in heavy extension, because they also want to play Dominus Purge, which is also just a really good card, which will then shut off the Bestials. So you can't play an extensive amount of Bestials, if really any. Not to mention, on top of that, the deck hurts a lot to, like, target negation. Like, if they stop your Eyes of Blue, your, like, Link 1, if they stop that effect, then you're not getting both effects out of it. But also on top of that, they cut you off of Mausoleum, which is also a big con to the deck. If you don't get to Mausoleum, you could be hurting quite a bit, depending on what the rest of your hand looks like, because Mausoleum is going to further extend your plays. It's going to get a Blue Eyes into the graveyard, so that way your Link 1 can bring it back, and then Maiden comes back, and so forth. Another con, and this is very minute, as I mentioned a little bit before, the deck plays in a nib quite a bit. That being said, if you play very low to the ground, you play your combo correct and sequence correctly, Nibiru is only going to out one monster, and that is the Spirit Dragon. But if you played your cards correctly, then most likely you already got your Drill Beam into rotation, and you have your True Light, so you can use True Light to bring back Blue Eyes on your opponent's turn, and then you have an Omni Negate, but also on top of that, you probably have Majesty in rotation, which means you probably have a 2-card pop as well. So Nib only hurts a little bit. Final con, and I touched on this a little bit with, like, target negation, but, like, too many forms of interaction hurts this deck a lot. Whereas decks like Malice can play through several dozen forms of interaction and still put up a presentable end board, but on top of that, you're starting with, like, 1 card, and that's your draw phase. This deck, if you get hit twice with the right interaction, it can just end your turn from there. But on top of that, if you manage to play through the second interaction, it's probably the third one that'll get you. But enough about that. Let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of the combos. All right, so the first combo we're going to be going over is mainly the main one, which is going to be Sage with Eyes of Blue in your opening hand. One thing to note here, to pull off this combo, you actually do need to have a second card in hand, which later in the combo you'll see me add like a Molcharmy Foolos to hand, because we do need the discard off of Wishes to be able to resolve it. So just ignore that when we get that far. But this is if we open Sage with Eyes of Blue and maybe like 4 other hand traps. As for every other video where I do combos, this is under the assumption that our opponent has no interaction with us, which is just an unrealistic world in this day of Yu-Gi-Oh! But to start, we will normal summon the Sage of Eyes of Blue, activate its effect to add 1 level 1 light tuner from deck to hand, which will be the Maiden of White. We will then link 1 for the Spirit with Eyes of Blue, activate its effect to add the Mausoleum of White, and then we'll activate the Maiden of White from hand to set the True Light to the board. We'll then activate the Mausoleum of White, use its effect to target the Spirit with Eyes of Blue, sending a Blue Eyes to the graveyard, and we will use the Link 1 effect to tribute for cost to summon the Blue Eyes. Because Blue Eyes was summoned, we'll activate Maiden's effect to summon her from the graveyard. This is where we'll add the Molcharmy Foolos to hand. Again, we had 4 other cards in hand for this example. We are only showing off if we open Sage. So the other 4 cards could be anything, but we will then activate the True Light to set the Wishes with Eyes of Blue, and we will activate its effect, discard the Foolos for cost to add a Effect Veiler and a Majesty of the White Dragon. Big thing to note here is that if you want to be more greedy with your combo, you could actually, instead of adding Effect Veiler, you can add the Sage with the Eyes of Blue to further use its effect to like target the Maiden, and then use Maiden to summon out like another Blue Eyes from like the graveyard or something like that, and then use the Sage to send her and then himself to summon a Blue Eyes from the deck. If you want to be more greedy, you can certainly go for that route. But especially if you don't already have Effect Veiler in hand, your combo is about to end here in a minute. So having Effect Veiler in hand just guarantees that you have the ability to negate your opponent during their own turn with something other than what's already present on the board. We're going to set the Majesty of the White Dragons, and then we're going to activate the Wishes to banish it for cost, target our Blue Eyes, and equip it with the Neo Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. We're then going to Synchro Summon, making sure that Neo Blue Eyes is in the graveyard, and we're going to summon out the Spirit Dragon. And that's it. Like I said, Blue Eyes is very down to earth. This is summon number 5 with the Spirit Dragon, so if you get nibbed here, like, that sucks. But we guarantee we have Effect Veiler in hand. We have the Trap card, which can reveal Blue Eyes from the graveyard. In this example, we only have 1 Blue Eyes in the graveyard. However, depending on what the rest of our hand looks like, we could guarantee that that second Blue Eyes is in the grave. Most hands can guarantee that both Blue Eyes are out of the deck at the end of the first turn. But like I said, it's a very down-to-earth combo. It's very straightforward. If you open Sage, you pretty much just have a very basic board of Spirit Dragon, which can negate a card in the graveyard. So if they out your True Light, you can negate your True Light's ability to pop your board. This can tag out into Thunderstorm Dragon, Blue Eyes Ultimate Spirit Dragon, which is essentially an on-board Omni Negate. And also, your opponent can no longer, hit your graveyard by banishing shit with like Bestials. And then on top of that, depending on what the rest of our hand looks like, we could have gone further with the combo, or even just had 3 other hand traps in our hand. All right, so the next combo I'm going to show off is if you open Maiden of White. It's damn near the exact same as if you opened Sage, but mild difference, just so you can get to the rest of the deck. We have Fool Loss in hand because we do need the discard for Wishes, something I should have started with the Sage combo, but I digress. We're going to start the turn off by activating the Maiden's effect, discard it for cost to activate, or more rather place, the True Light from the deck to the spell and trap zone. We are then going to just activate the True Light, set the Wishes into the back row, and we are going to shotgun that Wishes, discarding the Fool Loss to add a Sage and a Majesty of the White Dragons. And from here, it's pretty much the same. Just normal summon the Sage, Sage effect, add Veiler this time around. You can add like Master if you're playing it. You can add another Maiden. Really just up to you. But from here, we're going to link 1 into the Spirit effect to add the Mausoleum from deck to hand. And then we will proceed to activate the Mausoleum, target the Spirit, and then send the Blue Eyes, go Spirit effect, tribute for cost, special the Blue Eyes from the graveyard, Maiden effect, special from the graveyard, go Wishes effect, target Blue Eyes and banish for cost, to then put the Neo Blue Eyes Ultimate into the back row as an equip to the Blue Eyes, synchro away so that way the Neo Ultimate is in the graveyard for the Spirit Dragon. We will then proceed to set the Majesty and pass turn. We have 3 other cards in hand, plus this Effect Veiler that we can guarantee the search off of. We have True Light. Again, it's basically the same end board as Sage. Now, I'm not going to show it off here, but if you choose to want to lock your opponent and hit them with like the Secret Village of Spellcasters, what you're going to further do from here is you are going to use the Spirit Dragon effect to summon the Ancient Fairy Dragon now. You're going to normal summon the Effect Veiler, and then you will go Ancient Fairy Dragon, pop the Mausoleum, add the Secret Village, and then activate Secret Village. And then from there, you have your Majesty, which can pop 1 minimum, but again, most hands can guarantee you have both Blue Eyes in the graveyard or like one of them in the hand. And then you have True Light, which will then revive, so you can get a Spirit Dragon on your opponent's turn, but also you have a 3k beater, and then you have the lock. We're going to show off one final combo, which is going to be the Primite part of the deck and like how it bridges into everything else. I'm not going to be showing off any of like the Buster combos because the Buster combos are pretty straightforward. If you open Sage, you just instead search Whelp, and then you go full Blue Eyes combo, and then for your second normal summon, you normal the Whelp. If you open Whelp, you just normal Whelp, search the trap, and then link for the Blue Eyes link 1, and yeah, it's pretty straightforward. All right, so the next combo we're going to be talking about is if you open Primite Dragon Ether Barrel. Pretty much the end board is the exact same if you open Ether Barrel or if you open Lordly Load. Pretty much the same result, but for this example, we're just going to do Ether Barrel specifically. So we're going to go ahead and jump to the main phase. We're going to normal summon the Ether Barrel effect to set the Lordly Load. I accidentally added it to hand in this example, but it does set it. We're going to activate the Lordly Load, add the Drill Beam to hand, and then we are going to link 1 into the link 1 Blue Eyes, use the effect to add Mausoleum of White, and then we are going to just activate Mausoleum of White, use its effect, target the Spirit, dump the Blue Eyes to the graveyard, activate the Spirit effect, tribute for cost, revive the Blue Eyes, and then proceed to set the Drill Beam. And that's really it. If you open Ether Barrel, again, you have 4 other cards in hand. You might have like a Sage in hand or a Maiden in hand, or just ways to get to those 2 cards. But this is if you open Ether Barrel. This is what you're capable of. You already have pretty much half of the Blue Eyes end board with Blue Eyes and Mausoleum of White in play, and then you have Lordly Load and Drill Beam available, and since you have a normal monster on board, Drill Beam is live, so you have an Omni Negate. And again, this is the exact same end board regardless if you open Lordly Load or Ether Barrel. It has the same result. The only difference here is that if you lead with Ether Barrel, then you get to add the Drill Beam to hand, so like you can maybe negate like an Imperm or an Impulse or something, since those have to hit the board. But even then, still requires you to have like a Primite in hand or a Blue Eyes already on the board to do that. But it mildly changes like where the Drill Beam is going to be. And that's honestly really it. Like, I could go in more in-depth combos with Blue Eyes, but I'm really only going to show you guys the recommended combo, and because you don't want to lose to Nibiru. Like, there's no reason to lose to Nibiru with this deck when you have all of these other resources. You can go the Crimson Dragon line, you can go for just plenty of other lines. Like if you're playing Jet Dragon, there's a different line for that. There's plenty of other ways to play this deck, but realistically, you want to play more down to earth. The deck definitely plays better at a more mid-range style of play, so you don't really want to just overextend and be your own, you know, your own loss. But like I also did say when we were talking about the builds, the Buster Blader version of the deck loses a lot less to Nibiru than the Primite version does, because you do want to end on like that Blue Eyes for the Drill Beam, and you also realistically would like to keep the Spirit Dragon on the board. But I am curious about what you all think down in the comments section below. If you're not already and you like competitive based content or in-depth guides, consider subscribing to the channel, and also leave a like on this video. But with that, I'll see you all in the next one. See ya.